Jumping back into Chapter 7, Part 4. Just refreshing my memory on where I left off. Oh, so Bod finally connected with Scarlet in the graveyard, and she's just been kind of updating him on what she's been up to, and she finally realized that he wasn't actually an imaginary friend after all. Her parents had told her that he was, but instead that he's real somehow and living in the graveyard, and that's where we left off. Scarlet said that she didn't want a cup of tea, thank you, or a chocolate biscuit. Mr. Frost was concerned. Honestly, he told her, you look like you've seen a ghost. Well, the graveyard, not a bad place to see one if you were going to. I had an aunt once who claimed her parrot was haunted. She was a scarlet macaw, the parrot. The aunt was an architect. Never knew the details. I'm fine, said Scarlet. It was just a long day. I'll give you a lift home, then. Any idea what this says? Been puzzling over it for half an hour. He indicated a grave rubbing on the little table, held flat by a jam jar in each corner. Is that name Gladstone, do you think? Could be a relative of the Prime Minister, but I can't make out anything else. Afraid not, said Scarlet, but I'll take another look when I come out on Saturday. Is your mother likely to put in an appearance? She said she'd drop me off here in the morning. Then she has to go and get groceries for our dinner. She's cooking a roast chicken. Do you think, asked Mr. Frost hopefully, there are likely to be roast potatoes? I expect so, yes. Mr. Frost looked delighted. Then he said, I wouldn't want to put her out of her way. I mean, she's loving it, said Scarlet truthfully. Thank you for giving me a lift home. More than welcome, said Mr. Frost. They walked together down the steps in Mr. Frost's high, narrow house to the little entrance hall at the bottom of the stairs. Now, I just noticed that it kind of makes a little jump here. In Krakow, on Wawel Hill, there are caves called the Dragon's Den. Krakow is a city in Poland, named after a long-dead dragon. These are the caves that the tourists know about. There are caves beneath those caves that the tourists do not know and do not ever get to visit. They go down a long way, and they are inhabited. Silas went first, followed by the gray hugeness of Miss Lupescu, padding quietly on 4 feet just behind him. Behind them was Kandar, a bandage-wrapped Assyrian mummy with powerful eagle wings and eyes like rubies, who was also carrying a small pig. They had originally been 4 of them, but they had lost Harun in a cave far above when the Ifrit, as naturally overconfident as are all of its race, had stepped into a space bounded by 3 polished bronze mirrors and been swallowed up in a blaze of bronze light. In moments, the Ifrit could only be seen in the mirrors and no longer in reality. In the mirrors, his fiery eyes were wide opened and his mouth was moving as if he was shouting at them to leave and beware, and then he faded and was lost to them. Silas, who had no problem with mirrors, had covered one of them with his coat, rendering the trap useless. So, said Silas, now there are only 3 of us. And a pig, said Kandar. Why, asked Miss Lupescu, with a wolf tongue through wolf teeth, why the pig? It's lucky, said Kandar. Miss Lupescu growled, unconvinced. Did Harun have a pig? Asked Kandar simply. Hush, said Silas. They are coming, and from the sound of it, there are many of them. Let them come, whispered Kandar. Miss Lupescu's hackles were rising. She said nothing, but she was ready for them, and it was only by an effort of will that she did not throw back her head and howl. Wow. Okay, so there's a little update on what, maybe this is an example of the, what are they called? The honor guard. What they are up to. It's beautiful up this way, said Scarlet. Yes, said Bod. So, your family were all killed, said Scarlet. Does anyone know who did it? No, not that I know. My guardian only says that the man who did it is still alive and that he'll tell me the rest of what he knows one day. One day? When I'm ready. What's he scared of, that you'll strap on your gun and ride out to wreak vengeance on the man who killed your family? Bod looked at her seriously. Well, obviously, he said. Not a gun, though, but yes, something like that. You're joking. Bod said nothing. His lips were tight pressed together. He shook his head. Then he said, I'm not joking. It was a bright and sunny Saturday morning. They were just past the entrance to the Egyptian Walk, out of the direct sunlight under the pines and the sprawling monkey puzzle tree. Your guardian, is he a dead person too? Bod said, I don't talk about him. Scarlet looked hurt. Not even to me? Not even to you. Well, she said, be like that. Bod said, look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Just as Scarlet said, I promised Mr. Frost I wouldn't be too long. I'd better be getting back. Right, said Bod, worried he had offended her, unsure of what he should say to make anything better. He watched Scarlet head off on the winding path back to the chapel. A familiar female voice said with derision, Look at her, Miss High and Mighty. But there was no one to be seen. Bod, feeling awkward, walked back to the Egyptian Walk. Miss Lilibet and Miss Violet had let him store a cardboard box filled with old paperback books in their vault, and he wanted to find something to read. Scarlet helped Mr. Frost with his grave rubbings until midday, when they stopped for lunch. He offered to buy her fish and chips as a thank you, and they walked down to the fish and chip shop at the bottom of the road, and as they walked back up the hill, they ate their steaming fish and chips, drenched in vinegar and glittering with salt, out of paper bags. Scarlet said, If you wanted to find out about a murder, where would you look? I already tried the internet. Depends. What kind of a murder are we talking about? Something local, I think, about 13 or 14 years ago. A family was killed around here. Crikey, said Mr. Frost. This really happened? Oh, yes. Are you all right? Not really. Bit of a wimp, really. Things like that, I mean, local true crime. You don't like to think about it. Things like that happening here. Not something I'd expect of a girl your age to be interested in. It's not actually for me, admitted Scarlet. It's for a friend. Mr. Frost finished off the last of his fried cod. The library, I suppose. If it's not on the internet, it'll be in their newspaper files. What set you off after this? Oh, Scarlet wanted to lie as little as possible. She said, A boy, I know. He was talking about it. Definitely the library, said Mr. Frost. Murder. Brr, gives me the shivers. Me too, said Scarlet. A bit. Then, hopefully, Could you possibly drop me off at the library this afternoon? Mr. Frost bit a large chip in half, chewed it, and looked at the rest of the chip, disappointed. They get cold so fast, don't they? Chips. 1 minute you're burning your mouth on them. The next you're wondering how they cool off so quickly. I'm sorry, said Scarlet. I shouldn't be asking for rides everywhere. Not at all, said Mr. Frost. Just wondering how best to organize this afternoon and whether or not your mother likes chocolates. Bottle of wine or chocolates? Not really sure. Both, maybe? I can make my own way home from the library, said Scarlet, and she loves chocolates. So do I. Chocolates it is, then, said Mr. Frost, relieved. They had reached the middle of the row of high, terraced houses on the hill, and the little green Minnie parked outside. Get in, I'll run you over to the library. The library was a square building, all brick and stone, dating back to the beginning of the last century. Scarlet looked around, then went up to the desk. The woman said, Yes? Scarlet said, I wanted to see some old newspaper clippings. Is it for school? Said the woman. It's local history, said Scarlet, nodding, proud that she hadn't actually lied. We've got the local paper on microfiche, said the woman. She was large and had silver hoops in her ears. Scarlet could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She was certain she looked guilty or suspicious, but the woman led her into a room with boxes that looked like computer screens and showed her how to use them to project a page of the newspaper, one page of the newspaper at a time, onto the screen. One day we'll have it all digitized, said the woman. Now, what dates are you after? About 13 or 14 years ago, said Scarlett. I can't be more specific than that. I'll know it when I see it. The woman gave Scarlett a small box with 5 years' worth of newspaper on microfilm in it. Go wild, she said. Scarlett assumed that the murder of a family would have been front-page news, but instead, when she eventually found it, it was almost buried on page 5. It had happened in October, 13 years earlier. There was no color in the article, no description, just an understated list of events. Architect Ronald Dorian, 36, his wife Carlotta, 34, a publisher, and their daughter, Misty, 7, were found dead at 33 Dunstan Road. Foul play is suspected. A police spokesman said that it was too early to comment at this stage in their investigation, but that significant leads are being followed. There was no mention of how the family died and nothing said about a missing baby. In the weeks that followed, there was no follow-up, and the police did not ever comment, not that Scarlett could see. But that was it. She was certain. 33 Dunstan Road. She knew the house. She had been in there. She returned the box of microfilm to the front desk, thanked the librarian, and walked home in the April sunshine. Her mother was in the kitchen cooking, not entirely successfully, judging from the smell of burnt bottom of the saucepan that filled most of the flat. Scarlett retreated to her bedroom and opened the windows wide to let the burnt smell out. Then she sat on her bed and made a phone call. Hello, Mr. Frost? Scarlett, everything's still all right for this evening. How's your mother? Oh, it's all under control, said Scarlett, which was what her mother had said when she had asked. Mr. Frost, how long have you lived at your house? How long? Well, about 4 months now. How did you find it? Estate agent's window. It was empty and I could afford it. Well, more or less. Well, I wanted something within walking distance of the graveyard, and this was perfect. Mr. Frost? Scarlett wondered how to say it, and then she just said it. About 13 years ago, 3 people were murdered in your house. The Dorian family. There was a silence at the other end of the phone. Mr. Frost, are you there? Still here, Scarlett. Sorry, not the sort of thing you expect to hear. It's an old house. I mean, you expect things to happen a long time ago, but not... Well, what happened? Scarlett wondered how much she could tell him. She said, there was a little piece on it in an old newspaper. It only gave the address and nothing else. I don't know how they died or anything. Well, good Lord! Mr. Frost sounded more intrigued by the news than Scarlett could have expected. This, young Scarlett, is where we local historians come into our own. Leave it with me. I'll find out everything I can and report back. Thank you, said Scarlett, relieved. I assume this phone call is because if Nuna thought there were murderers... I assume this phone call is because if Nuna thought there were murders going on in my house, even 13-year-old ones, you'd never be allowed to see me or the graveyard again. So, suppose I won't mention it unless you do? Thank you, Mr. Frost. See you at 7 with chocolates. That's where I have to stop. So intriguing. Wow. We are getting... I'm going to show you now. This is what we have left of the book. We are getting near the end, so we should be looking for that, where we think the story is headed for the climax. We're coming to the close, so we should start expecting answers to start coming up for some of these questions we've been wondering about. And it sounds like Scarlett, at least, is making some progress in figuring some of this stuff out. And I wonder what she's going to learn. Until next time.